Hey everybody, it's Justin McElroy from Polygon.com, joined by my brother and colleague Griffin McElroy, and we're here to talk with Patrick Alunig. He is the CEO of nDreams. We're here to talk about the assembly. Patrick, welcome.
Hi there. Good to speak to you.
So your trailers for the assembly have maybe been intentionally a little vague, but if I were to just walk up to you on the street randomly and say, "Hi, excuse me, what's the assembly?"
Hey, excuse me, you look like a game developer.
You look like a game developer. Tell me about the assembly. What is the assembly?
So it's a VR adventure game. You plays two different characters. You switch between the two characters as you go through the story. It's about a sort of mysterious organization. They have this big underground bunker under the Nevada desert, full of scientists and engineers, and they're researching and doing experiments on things that are kind of morally grey or maybe even illegal, but they think are good for mankind. So you exploring this amazing thing. There's lots of moral choices you have to make in there. So lots of decisions are actually quite difficult for you. You know, would you kill one person to save 1,000? That kind of thing. And it sounds easy when you think about it, but when you're faced with it in VR and you've got the options in front of you, it actually becomes quite powerful and quite emotional. So it's a kind of 4 or 5 hour adventure game with a great story.
So the assembly is coming to several VR platforms: Oculus, Rift, Morpheus, the Vive, and...
That's right.
Okay. I was just making sure I got them all. What is it about the assembly that made you decide to create it as a VR experience?
Well, when we played around with VR headsets for the first time, you know, we found that what we liked and what everybody in the studio liked was just exploring and looking around and, you know, looking up at, you know, cobwebs and looking under tables and examining things. So we thought adventure games were the perfect genre for VR. You know, we're big fans of adventure games for a long time. Love the stuff companies like Telltale had done with Walking Dead and some of their series, and really wanted to do adventure in VR. And therefore we sat down, came up with some ideas, and the assembly was one that just leapt out of us. We love this mysterious kind of sinister organization, and it's a really fun story.
Is it difficult making a cross-platform VR game? It's something that we haven't really talked a whole lot about. Obviously, that term cross-platform means something completely different when you're talking about consoles, but when you're talking about VR with actual different, you know, visual capabilities, I can only imagine it's even more complicated.
Yeah, and I think it's actually got easier, believe it or not, now that we've had the Oculus Touch come out, and we've got the Vive controllers, and we've also got the Move controllers on the PlayStation Morpheus. You know, they're all actually fairly similar in terms of what they do. You know, some are slightly better than others. There's a few differences, but they're not too far apart. And the same with the headsets. They're all really great now. You know, if you play a great game on the Morpheus or on the Vive or on the new Oculus, you know, they're all very, very similar. So actually, it's not too bad. It's not too bad at all. Designing for VR is tricky, you know, compared to a normal game, but across the different headsets, it's not too different.
The assembly is very much about player choice, as you said, and we see in the trailer. I already have problems like making those choices. I get like stumped. I would imagine that once you put someone physically in a world like that where they're being completely surrounded, that it gets even harder to make moral choices. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I really believe that VR acts like a kind of emotion amplifier, and we see that with fear. I don't know if you get the chance to play the amazing Alien Isolation demo last year on the Oculus, and that was the scariest thing in the world. This thing, Alien, comes at you, and you're just, oh my God, you rip the headset off because you're so scared. It's amazing. So fear is definitely amplified, and I think all other emotions are as well. And what we find with the assembly is that choice, that, oh my God, what am I going to do? That sense of moral dilemma is much, much more powerful because you feel like you're there. You're not a spectator looking through a screen. You're actually in the world looking around it.
So E3 is gaming's biggest marketing event of the year. It's sort of the you know, one of the biggest purposes for the show, and we've seen some of that difficulty in getting the message of what VR is capable of across, say during like the Oculus press conference, where you know you can't really get that experience of putting the actual mask on somebody to show them what it is that you're doing. How difficult is it trying to communicate what the assembly is without being able to just grab a person and put this thing on their face?
It is tricky. It's hard. I mean, you're absolutely right. We've had people come in expecting VR, you know, they expect to put a headset on and almost see like 100-foot TV screen in front of them. And like, no, it's not like that at all. It's actually, you're in there and you can look around, and you can say that all you want, but until you try VR for the first time, it is very, very difficult. What we've had to do, I think, is we're just talking about Assembly as a great game, as a really good storyline, as a really great adventure game. And you know what, it's also in VR as well. And I'm really hoping that the hardware manufacturers will get lots of demo units out there and get lots of people trying the headsets out, because once you've seen it, you know, most people are hooked. They really are.
Do you think adventure games games themselves are really well tailored to VR? Because I've only messed around with VR a little bit. We actually have had one here in the New York office while we've been here for E3, and just playing them. Some of the most fun stuff I've done with it are very limited, game mechanic ideas. Like we played one where you're just swinging around like Spider-Man, and that's the only game mechanic. But it's some of the most fun I've had playing a game because you're immersed in this VR environment. And when I think about limited mechanics, like that's adventure games. Adventure games are usually point and click. You have some inventory. Yeah. Do you think that if VR becomes this thing that's in every household, adventure games are going to reach a new high?
I think so. I think it's really suitable. I mean, when you're in VR, you feel like you're there, and therefore you don't want to run at the speed of a Usain Bolt because you're not used to doing that. You don't want to spin around 3.5 times a second like you might do in Call of Duty, because if you did that in real life, you'd feel a bit ill. It's about just making things feel very realistic. And a lot of games at the moment are ramped up to 11. I saw the amazing Just Cause 3 trailer the other day, and you grappling hook a jet flying past it. And if you did that in real life, that would be pretty weird, actually. You probably wouldn't survive it. So VR's more about dialing things back a little bit and making it feel a bit more realistic. And the great thing about adventure games is, you can take it at your own pace. You wander around, you're exploring things, looking in, you're talking to characters, you've got great plot twists. We've got some scary moments in there as well, but it's not rushing around. You don't have to sprint, you don't have to dash, and I think it works really well as a first VR game.
Is it nerve-wracking at all putting a lot of resources and time into a VR game when it is basically the Wild West out there in terms of like how many will sell, how much will it cost, what will launch when? Does that provide a lot of challenge for you as a studio?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely scary. And when we sort of pivoted very early, actually, about 21 months ago, we decided to focus on VR. I've previously done a lot of virtual world stuff with PlayStation and PlayStation Home, actually, and and that was scary then because we even now at least we can see release dates or release windows. We know the headsets are coming. It's much easier, much more relaxing now. But yeah, it's right. It's a challenge because the technology is changing all the time. There's always something new. It is a Wild West, and it's exciting and scary at the same time. But sometimes you got to be first. You got to try things out. We believe in VR, we really do, and I think that's why we dived into it. And if VR doesn't work, hey, it's not going to be good for us, but I really think it will do, and I think I'm feeling more confident every week that goes by, and having been here at E3 and seen so many amazing other VR games as well, I really think it's going to happen now.
Cool.
What are some of the most surprising tweaks that you had to make to your sort of approach to designing a game? What are some of the big lessons? I'm imagining there's a steep learning curve that you've had to go through with the assembly. What have been some of the big takeaways for you specifically?
Well, some big obvious things like, cutscenes. A lot of games rely on cutscenes, but cutscenes don't work at all well in VR. If you jump from one camera to another, it's truly horrible. Things like on-screen displays. So many games have bullets or lives or health or, ammo or whatever drawn on the top of the screen. But in VR, there is no front. You can't just draw it on your eyeballs. So where do you put that information? Do you put it 0.5 meter in the air floating there, or do you ideally try and stick it on a 3D object like a watch or something you can look at? So that kind of thing. Subtitles, how do you subtitle in VR when you don't have a front screen? And more specific things like moving around in VR is a challenge. It's using the right stick particularly can be a challenge for some people. So playing around with different methods of controlling movement in VR is interesting too. But there's lots of cool things as well. I mean, one of the fun things is that we have to create artwork, a lot more artwork in VR, because people look under things and look behind things. And in traditional games, if you looked at the desk, you'd find there wasn't actually a texture or anything underneath it because no one ever sees it. But in VR, you can actually bend your head down and do it. So we're having to do a ton more artwork to cope with that, really.
Yeah, I bet there's a lot of like, oh God, our table doesn't have a bottom. We have to get out of there and draw something on the bottom of the table. Anything.
You just stick some gum down there, and then people are like, "This is the most immersive experience I've ever had in my entire life." Did you see the table gum? It was amazing.
I didn't miss it.
Well, do you know, in fact, we've had that. We've had, some coffee cups that have got like sort of stains and dirt inside them, and some people are leaning into them and going, "Oh my God, that's amazing!" So sometimes it's the little things, little tiny details, little Easter egg type things that people love exploring in VR. Actually,
Patrick, this is normally the part of the interview where I'd ask when your game will be available and how much it'll cost, but I'm guessing your guess is as good as mine at this point, right? I mean, we could both take a shot.
Well, we're going to be there at day one, we think, on all of the headsets. So HTC have said Q4, Oculus have said Q1, Sony have said first half of next year. So hopefully we'll be there with them on day one. Price point, it's a kind of 4 to 5 hour game, so we're going to price it fairly according to that. So, it's not going to be a AAA price, but, it'll be sensibly priced, the same kind of price you'd expect to find a game like that on Steam or PSN or something.
Patrick, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Looking forward to playing the assembly. And thanks for making some time for us.
Thank you very much. Take care.
And thank you to you at home for watching the video. We got a lot more at Polygon.com, so go check all that out, and we will talk to you again real soon.